very good evening to everybody, and thank you for joining me again. It's Christopher Daigan at home once again with my program this evening, In Concert, Saturday night's program, a classical selection of music. And tonight in Concert, I'll be playing for you a selection of music by Franz Liszt. We will be starting the performance at 6 o'clock, but always these few minutes just before the performance starts gives you a chance just to relax and find all of us, me here technically as well, to find just comfort in our space and take a few deep breaths, get ready for 6 p.m. I hope you've all had a good week and you're looking forward to joining us again for some very exciting music tonight. Just a reminder once again, these performances are all free. They are streamed on various platforms, various pages on Facebook, as well as on Vimeo and YouTube at my channels, Christopher Daigan, and as well as my website, Music Revival. And all of the previous 14 or so performances we have done are also available at Music Revival, and most of them at the Vimeo channel as well. So you can watch all of those at your own leisure. If you aren't able to watch this evening's program in full and you would like to revisit it or share it, you also can see it again then, as I say, at our website, which is very useful to have these programs streamed live and then also archived or stored for future use. If you're able to support me in these programs, as I say, they're all free. With the current situation with people not being allowed to gather in groups in any place as our concerts normally take place, relying entirely on these live streams and the donation from people that I'm playing these performances and giving these performances out. And people have been very generous in supporting, buying tickets. There's no ticket to be bought as such, but for many people who come to my concerts regularly on a monthly basis, they've continued to pay in either into my bank account or through Quicket or PayPal. Certainly the bank account direct is the easiest and the most convenient. Or if you'd like to make a donation, either small or large, towards these programs and towards the continuation of the program, especially as a free event for the general public, that would be greatly appreciated. It is 6 p.m, so I'll be starting this evening's program, and I've got a few technical things I'm taking care of this evening to get rid of that, because it sits right in front of the keyboard, and there's no point in having that strapped in front of the keyboard for the rest of the evening, or certainly in front of any of the pieces. So this evening's program is devoted to the music of the composer Franz Liszt, an incredibly exciting, incredibly daring and innovative composer and pianist, teacher, an incredibly interesting person. I'm not going to tell you too much about that, but just briefly, Liszt himself, I think, is one of the most fascinating figures of the 19th century. Here's someone who was born in Hungary, or in a town which he saw was Hungarian, it's now actually in Austria. And he spent the early part of his life, his father took him off to Paris as a young man where he studied. He met Beethoven. I mean, that's incredible. As a child, he met Beethoven, and Beethoven apparently approved of Liszt's great musical abilities, even as a young boy. Liszt went on to become the greatest pianist of all time, as some people say. He toured extensively through Europe. This is in the early to mid-19th century. And I'm always amazed at how far he traveled, right throughout Germany, Austria, Italy, France, England, to Portugal, to Turkey, and into Russia, to Moscow, St. Petersburg. I mean, it's incredible to think that all of that by stagecoach and probably by ship here and there, that he managed to play all these concerts and travel. He had an incredibly interesting personal life. I'm not going to go into details there. And then he went into refining incredible amount of his music again and again. He composed an enormous amount of music and taught a large number of students, all for free, and in the last years of his life took up minor orders as a priest. So there's a very varied life. And I think what's fascinating for me is that Liszt himself composed for many different reasons. He was a great concertizer, he was a very serious musician, man of, with great religious interests. He knew how to perform, he knew how to win an audience. He invented this idea of the piano recital, the fact that one person, that one musician was needed for a large-scale concert, that you didn't need an orchestra and singers and lots of people to produce a large-scale event. He said, I can do this all on my own. And I'll tell you a little bit about that later on, what he managed to do. So he's an incredibly important musician for our concertizing as we know it today. The first piece we'd like to play for you this evening is one of his most famous melodies, and certainly a very generous composition, the famous Liebestraum No. 3. Liszt wrote these three pieces for voice and piano. Around each of the poems centers around a different form of love. And in this particular poem, the poet says that how is it possible to love one as much as one possibly needs to, or as one possibly can. It's almost overpowering, it's almost overwhelming, that feeling of being so incredibly in love. It's such a potent experience. We all know that. And he became such a success, and he was very interested in rewriting the song, which he did for solo piano. So this is his own revision of a song for just the solo piano, where he puts the melody and the piano parts together. And it has become, as I say, one of his most celebrated compositions, the Liebestraum No. 3 by Franz Liszt. There we go. That was Liszt's own version, his own rearrangement of his song Dreams of Love, or Liebestraum number 3. So this evening's program, as I said, devoted to the music of Franz Liszt. Very dramatic, very intense music, a lot of practicing going on this week. And I can see already there's a lot of spirit already happening in this evening's program. So the second piece I'd like to play is one of his famous Hungarian Rhapsodies. Now Liszt was Hungarian by birth, as I said earlier, but he left Hungary as a young boy and he actually never spoke Hungarian, apparently. His father had taken off into Europe and he spent the rest of his younger years traveling. In the later years of his life, or in the later part, he came back to Hungary and proclaimed himself as a proud Hungarian, but said it in French. He said, "I am Hungarian," but he spoke French, saying that. So the Hungarian people seem to have had a very perhaps a very mixed relationship with Liszt, and really because calling what he thought was Hungarian folk music Hungarian Rhapsodies, these Hungarian Rhapsodies that he wrote, he thought he was writing down the folk music of the people that he heard. But instead of the real folk music in the country and across the various regions, he really was writing down and composing music around the gypsy people, a group of roving people who toured around Europe and were never really welcome wherever they were. So to call gypsy music, really, in essence, is a very tricky subject. But gypsy music, Hungarian music, or Hungarian national music, was something I'm not sure if the Hungarian people have quite forgiven him for. Nevertheless, Liszt writes a number of these pieces, as I say, around various melodies. They're all very exciting. This particular Rhapsody number 12 is said to be the most cohesive or the most concise. I think it's a brilliant piece of music because some of the melodies you hear in the beginning are retransformed and reinvented into grand anthems at the end. There's so many brilliant textures, cascades and sounds, and brilliant treble figures. It's a very, very exciting and pleasing piece of music to listen to. So this is the Hungarian Rhapsody number 12, usually the kind of piece that one might finish a recital program off. It's so exciting and so bold. But with the program of Liszt, where do you choose? How do you put these pieces together? So I'm going to play it right at the beginning. out. A big ask. It's a big piece of music, the Hungarian Rhapsody number 12. Now, Liszt would have needed you need a grand concert hall to play a piece of music like that. And Liszt apparently would have really performed to the audience. There would have been a great sense of showmanship and a great sense of occasion, playing his Hungarian music with such pride. And if the piano, which was not quite as strong as the piano we have today, but the pianos of the day sort of didn't cope, there would be multiple pianos in the background that he could bring on and carry on playing. Incredibly exciting music. Now, just to give you an extra, what I've managed to do here this evening is actually to add some little graphics. So if I push this magic button, this is a cartoon, which you should be seeing now, showing very cleverly Liszt at the piano and the adulation from the audience. I mean, what adulation is that? People clamoring and the ladies in the front row fainting with complete abandon at the passion and the intensity of his playing. But what I really like about this cartoon is that it took me a long time to figure this out until someone told me, a real Lisztophile, an expert on Liszt, told me that those aren't in fact little flowers or even bees buzzing around there. They are butterflies. And in fact, what happened, it was fashionable for young ladies to arrive at Liszt's concerts with a little cage filled with butterflies, and at a certain point of the great passion and intensity of the moment, they would release these butterflies out the cage, and the hall would be filled with thousands of fluttering butterflies at Liszt play. Isn't that a wonderful idea? What a great story and what a great image. There's Liszt, very slender, long-haired gentleman, and here we go. I'm going to show you another picture. This is a portrait by the artist Lehmann, a very famous portrait of Liszt. You can really get the sense of the noble look that he cultivated in this black tunic that he wore. Liszt, one of the things that he did do, apparently, was, apart from inventing this idea of the recital, he was also the first pianist to turn the piano sideways to an audience, not only so that the sound of the piano lid would be projected, but so that people could admire his incredibly noble profile from the side when he played. Isn't that amazing? Really rapturous. So, the aid of some graphics there. I've got some more things to show you later on. Now, one of the things, as I said, is that Liszt played all these immense concerts, this huge number of concerts, and promoted music by himself. Not only playing his own music, but playing the music of others. And this was quite rare. It was very rare and very new idea at the time. The fact that a musician wasn't in public did not only play his own personal music, but that of other composers. And he did this not only playing the original compositions, but also arranging pieces and arranging melodies from the popular operas of the day, which not only brought the recognition or the music to greater audiences where maybe the operas weren't performed, but everyone likes to hear a tune that they know. And so Liszt very cleverly rewrote well-known sections, well-known arias and melodies from operas of the day, and I'm going to play one of these for you now, from the opera Lucia di Lammermoor by Donizetti, big hit of the time, the very famous scene where there are 6 voices singing together. And Liszt, in this transcription, is quite straightforward. He adds a few bits here and there, but it's a fantasy, a dramatic fantasy on the sextet from Lucia di Lammermoor by Donizetti. And another little surprise, I'm trying a few things out this evening. I'm going to try a different camera angle. And there we go, hello, this side. So, different angle, let's see how this one works. This is the fantasy from Lucia di Lammermoor, the opera Donizetti, by Donizetti, arranged and recreated by Franz Liszt. That's the dramatic fantasy, certainly a dramatic fantasy, by Franz Liszt, an arrangement of, on this camera here, an arrangement of the sextet from Donizetti's opera Lucia de Lammermoor. A lot of notes, goodness, Liszt wrote a lot of notes in that music. And as I always say, it's such an incredibly strange experience. I really hope you're enjoying this at home, because it's very odd to play such big music in such a small space and with no audience. It's very, very odd. It's really quite strange to muster up all that energy and get all that activity going and not know, in fact, where it's going, whether it's actually reaching anyone at all. So I hope you're enjoying the fantasy dramatique Lucia de Lammermoor by Franz Liszt. Now, there's another very interesting and I think very often overlooked side of Liszt's music. I did a program several years ago called Liszt versus Liszt, which I think was it sort of sums up my a kind of attitude, or a number of attitudes, because some people hate Liszt's music. They really think it's dreadful, and other people love it. And it's also interesting that he wrote such varied styles. If you compare the three pieces that I've played for you already, compared with the Consolation, number 3, which I'm going to play for you now. And this represents a very different side of Liszt's personality and output. He wrote these 6 short pieces, and this number 3, the third of the 6, is a very beautiful and incredibly touching, consoling piece of music. I think consolation really is the right word, and I think it's something, a sentiment that we all could appreciate right now. One of my favorite compositions there, the Consolation, number 3 from a set of 6 consolations by Franz Liszt. A very gentle piece of music, Chopinesque almost, you might say. I'm quickly going to shift cameras again. Magically. There we go. Look at that. Incredible. So all of the music, interestingly enough, that I've chosen this evening has been inspired by various external elements. I find that very interesting. If you compare Chopin and Liszt, Chopin really writes from his internal experiences all the time. It's all about his internal life and expressing that, whereas Liszt is very much a man of the world and he's very inspired by everything he sees around him. Now, I was hoping actually to play extra music, the extra 3 pieces for you this evening, but I see I'm running out of time already. So I'm going to keep that. We'll have to have a Liszt, the music of Liszt Volume 2 at some point in the future, because there is so much incredible music of his to play. And as we heard, Liszt was inspired by poetry in the first item. He was inspired by what he thought was Hungarian folk music. He was inspired by the opera of Donizetti and the Fantasy Dramatique that I played. And this beautiful, this Consolation really is a very authentic sound, a very heartfelt notion that he created there. The last 2 pieces I'd like to play for you this evening, the one very beautiful, really magnificent, and the last one very, very well known, are inspired by 2 contemporary musicians. Now this is really fascinating. Here is Liszt being inspired by his colleagues and inspired by musicians around him. The first of which is the composer Frederic Chopin, who I've just mentioned. And I've got a fascinating little cartoon that I'd like to show you here. I love this. This is absolutely very funny, I think. Here's a picture, a cartoon drawn of Chopin teaching one of his young lady students to play the piano. Now, Chopin's music and piano style was all about nuance and the beautiful sound of the piano in an intimate, creative way. Very artistic in a very sensitive way. Always a watery sound he liked the pianist to create. Liszt, on the other hand, cultivated a very dramatic, big, almost aggressive sound, one might say at times, that would suit big concert halls. Remember, Chopin never really played many, he probably played no more than I think about 10 or 12 major concerts in his life, because his style was suited toward a more intimate surround. And here, look at the incredible expression that's caught Chopin beautifully, with that very sharp nose and that terrible downward turned mouth. And he says to the student, "Don't play like that. That's the Liszt way of playing." They certainly admired each other's playing. And the poor student's shocked. Chopin telling her that she mustn't play like Liszt. I think it's very funny. Even Chopin, the way he's pointing at her, and her little shocked expression on her face. I think it's a very charming cartoon. Chopin saying, "Do not play like Liszt, like that. That's the Liszt way," especially when accompanying the voice. So, charming little image there. And the composition which I'd like to play for you is a piece of music, even though I'm not sure if Liszt acknowledged this anywhere, but it's generally acknowledged that it's inspired by Chopin's playing. It's an etude called La Leggerezza, or the lightness. And the reason why we can say that it's really trying to assimilate Chopin's style, the harmonies, the chromatic notes that he used, the fluidity, the way the sounds and the melodies are created, even the key of F minor, Chopin's favorite key that he composed in. Liszt composes La Leggerezza. And it's a very Lisztian piece. It's still got all the brilliance and excitement of Liszt's music, but a very beautiful composition. And the very last one I'm going to play them right after each other, inspired by the great violinist of the time, Nikolai Paganini. Paganini was so famous and so legendary in his time that people thought that he had sold his soul to the devil in exchange for his violinistic ability. He cultivated a very unique stage persona, very tall and elegant. He wore blue-rimmed glasses, wore his hair very long, and he would make all sorts of antics on stage, breaking strings and cultivating this very unusual, otherworldly persona that people thought that he literally sold his soul. And everywhere Paganini went, he sold huge numbers of tickets because people really wanted to see what was going on. They wanted to experience this not only musically, but the stage presence of this man. So Liszt was very inspired by this, and in this particular piece, he wrote 6 pieces inspired by Paganini's music, taking melodies from Paganini's violin compositions. And in this case, he takes the melody from the third of the third movement of the second violin concerto of Paganini, and rewrites a set of variations around this charming melody. Some people have used it locally for adverts, banking institutions. Very recognizable, but it's called La Campanella, meaning the small bells. It's a very effective, one of Liszt's most well-known, and also one of his most difficult compositions, because you'll see it has some incredibly difficult skips and traversing the keyboard back and forward and up and down. Now, one likes to hear all the notes played absolutely perfectly, but I'm going to ask, please bear with me. I'm running the technical side. I'm playing. This is the 14th concert I've played in 8 weeks. I have been practicing, but it's one of those very risky pieces that you never really know what's going to happen. The mood, the motion, the piano, everything can just work or not. So let's see what happens with this one. First of all, La Leggerezza, and the second of all, La Campanella by Franz Liszt. That's a workout and a half. Liszt, La Campanella, one of his most celebrated and feared, as you can see why, feared pieces of music, but very effective. The brilliance of Liszt, the great performer, taking something, a familiar melody and turning it into something quite unique, quite magical, extraordinary piano writing there. That brings us to the end of this evening's In Concert with myself, Christopher Daigen. Now, if you've enjoyed this, please do consider buying a ticket. It's obviously not compulsory, but if there are tickets bought for these performances, it really does help us sustain them. Not only free to the public, but it really helps sustain the project, Music Revival, as we have been working for 23 or so years, and now in our new permanent home online with live streams. It's an incredibly tricky situation to be in, but I'm very grateful for everyone who has supported buying tickets or given donations, sometimes quite substantial ones, and we really need to keep them coming. So I'm even quite out of breath after playing that. Good, it's gracious. So thank you for joining me this evening. We have a new program on next Thursday night with Piano Hour, which will be a varied selection of music. And I can't say too much about it, but I think there are going to be some exciting developments around that, which might be I think are going to be very interesting, very exciting, that are going to involve an upgrade of the technical equipment and how these concerts are put together from my home studio. At the moment, I'm running off one, sometimes two cell phones, there we go. Two cell phones to keep these concerts going and to make them work. So if you are able to support us, we are very, very grateful. You can find all the details at our website, Music Revival, or a very interesting platform called Patreon. Patreon, //Christopher Daigen, can give you a quick, there we go. Look, magic, there we go. All the details coming up on the screen of where you can find us at Patreon, and visit our website. You can watch all the previous concerts. Very exciting music tonight, and I think I've worked really hard. So thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you at one of our future performances. Keep well and look after yourselves. Oh, there's a spelling error there. A spelling error in Music Revival. Sorry about that.